We conclude chapter 8 today. And we're going to speak about 5 degrees of separation in the human condition. I know the truth is we're only going to speak about the human condition. We're not going to reference it to the divine condition. That will actually be in chapter 9 in continuation. And what's important is when we understand the way things are by us, and in the divine order of things, they're not that way. And what's important is as a result that we don't create God in our image. That's hugely important, which we tend to do. So we need to understand the human condition in order that we can understand the divine order of things, or as best as we can understand it, how it differs, and as a result, how God is the power of God within creation. And as a result of that, appreciating the creative process in its unique manner, which will bring us to a unity, a oneness with God. A unity. All right. So the human condition is, as we said, 5 degrees of separation. What does that mean? We start off with intelligence. That is king. You know, it's interesting that my head's on top. That's not necessarily all the time. When I'm lying down, it's not that way. Animals, it's not that way for the most part. Right? They're on fours. The human condition is that the mind should be on top. Our chokhmah, our wisdom, is the greatest thing about, the highest and the most elevated thing about the human condition. Now, that's the beginning. It's called Reishis Chokhmah. The beginning is Chokhmah, is wisdom. In the spiritual realm, in the divine realm, likewise, Chokhmah is the beginning of all life force. It's the fountainhead of life, of all creatures. So how's it in the human condition? In the human condition is that through wisdom that develops into bina, understanding then together, Chokhmah and Bina together, they are funneled through das, which is the connection between the intelligence and the emotions. The way it should be, or the way it's meant to be in the human condition, is that our intelligence should feed our emotions. In other words, when I know something is good, like learning Tanya, so I should have an emotional appeal for it, a connection, and emotionally. When I know that something is bad, like, smoking is bad, right? It's not a good thing. Then I should have a disgust for it. Not embracing it, pushing it away. Well, we're talking about feelings first. A disgust in my heart for smoking. I'm just giving that. This is by way of example. Or if I know how bad it is to say something ill, to speak lashon hara, to speak ill about another, so I will, have a disgust for that in my heart. I'm talking about the heart right now. So from the intelligence that feeds the heart, that's the first degree of separation. Well, why is there a separation there? Is because what you know in your mind doesn't mean necessarily it comes down into your heart. Just because you know that it's not good to speak about somebody else, or you know how good Tanya is, that doesn't mean you have a feeling in your heart for it, or whatever, whatever things that we know intellectually. However, so that is a degree of separation. That which the mind feeds the heart. Now, the emotions are ultimately what gives us from there to the next degree of separation. It brings to thought. So when we speak about intelligence, we're not talking about what you think about. Thinking is thinking, intelligence is intelligence. What is the difference? You can have a very high IQ, right? Great degree of intelligence, and a lot of knowledge, and a lot of knowledge in your brain. However, you are you talk about you think about nonsense. So just because you have a lot of information doesn't mean that you don't think about nonsensical things or unimportant things in your mind, and the vice versa. You could be a person who doesn't have great intelligence, but you're always thinking about intelligent things, about valuable things. So we need to make sure we have a distinction between our intelligence and what we think about. So in the end, what do we think about in life? Well, those things that we have feelings towards, not those things that we are aware of. Awareness feeds the heart, and that heart then has feelings. If they're strong feelings, like today, my prayers were not the way I'd like them to be quite honest, because on my heart, I had some things that were weighing me, and then during prayers, that seeped into my thought process, what I was thinking. Try to push it away and to focus in on the prayers, but being that it weighed on my heart, that then brought up into a language of words in my mind that I'm thinking. Those are the things that this is where language begins. In the heart, there isn't language. It's beyond language. And just as intelligence is also beyond language. Emerges from there as language, but it is not language. The heart is beyond language. I mean, language meaning in the terms of words that we think. So it emerges from there. So that's another degree of separation when it comes into definitive words, letters that issue forth from the emotive attributes that we have. So again, when you feel a feeling of love, so now in your heart you're going to have words in your mind about the expression of that love. It has a specific expression. From that expression that you're thinking now in your mind about this person that you care for, that you have a feeling in your heart, and for whatever reason, because your mind, you thought about that person in a positive way, that fed the feeling that you already had there and aroused that emotion in your heart, that now you're thinking about that person in a kind way, about a kindness that you want to say to them. Now that's the next degree of separation, is now to actually verbalize it with words. In the words, you're wonderful. You're amazing. You're amazing. That's an expression of the feeling that you have in your heart that now came into your mind, and thoughts that you have, and now you express it into words. That's another degree of separation. And when we say a separation, it's not just that there's a degree of separation here, and therefore there can be, there's a come down of the life force. The life force, the way it's in the brain and the mind, is the most powerful. As it comes down and it's now goes into the heart, it becomes diminished, the awareness to what the feeling will be in the heart. It will be diminished. The life force we're talking about, and not obviously in the mind you don't have a feeling. I mean, there is an element of feelings in the mind, and there is an intelligence in the heart, and that's the idea of a knowing heart, right? So because one causes the other, the intelligence causes the emotion, so that means there has to be, like, it's a link between them. So there has to be some kind of degree of emotion in the intelligence, and some kind of intelligence in the emotions that it's giving birth to. Although there is a degree of separation over here between them. So, but the life force in the intelligence is much more much more powerful. And that's what the degree of separation over here is. It comes down into the heart, and that's why you have the neck over here, because it gets lost in translation from the what you know and how that affects you in your heart. How that affects you in your heart. And from there, the feeling in the heart is beyond language until it comes into words, which that the words now are a container. The word in Hebrew for word is teva. Teva means, like Noah's ark was called a teva, because it's a container. It has parameters to it, limitations to it. A word means this and not that. A feeling is beyond that, and is much more expansive because it's not limited by a word that contains the feeling. But when you put it into a thought, so now that's a lesser form of vitality that is coming from the soul as expressed in the word versus how it was in the emotion. And then from the word now that you actually, and word meaning in thought, is now the source of the spoken word. Because you can't speak something if it was not something that was thought beforehand. At some point, at least, without going into too much into that. So now, vested in the spoken word is the thought. Vested in the thought is the emotion. Vested in the emotion is the intelligence. All these are different degrees of separation in the human condition. And finally, of course, we have action. So that expression of love that you have, that you now express in, giving a flower to, to the person you just said is magnificent, that you had the thoughts about that person in your mind about how wonderful they are, right? Thinking about, and that was produced because of the powerful emotion that you have that was guided, invested in it, the perspective of mind, of intelligence that led to that. So this all applies to the soul of the human being. All created beings in the higher, all created souls in the higher and lower worlds, everything begins with wisdom, from intelligence to emotions, thought, speech, action. There's 5 degrees there. And there's a great distance between our intelligence, right, and what it takes to, intelligence as opposed to action. For example, the action, I have a Kleenex box in my hand right now. The movement of that Kleenex box is a very simple form of vital force that's expressed by my soul versus speech versus even more complicated, more abstract thought, and even much more is in emotions that is beyond the language, and then intelligence, it's even beyond that. Very distant, the intelligence versus a simple action. So, yesterday was babysitting grandson, and the action of moving the hands. It's a little, 2 months old. Is a very it's beautiful, it's wonderful, but compare that to the lack of capability of speaking right now, only 2 months old or 3 months old, of course, is a much more refined skill. Thought, to be able to concentrate on something in thought, like in your prayers, to be focused, for me, and then emotions and intelligence. That's in the human condition. And that's today's class. Well, we're going to learn tomorrow that the divine condition isn't like that. Even though in the divine condition there is intelligence, there are divine intelligence, there is divine emotions, there is the Word of God, right? But what we will learn, it's a different condition than ours. We will tend to create God in our image and therefore think about it in the same way as we think of ourselves. But we will see that's not the case. Where is this going? To appreciate the presence of divine intelligence in this world, and not just divine intelligence, but God himself, who the intelligence is one with him, and then divine emotions, how it is one with, and the Word of God. That's where we're going with this, to be able to see a simplistical oneness in creation through this, but we're gonna have to wait for that. Any questions, any comments, any thoughts? Welcome, Vilma, welcome, Addie, Mare, Liana, Brian, Lindsay, Jeff.
Hi, Rabbi. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Any thoughts, any questions on this, anybody? Let me just see over here. And I know now that the Creator is one, no separation of any attributes unlike man. You're ahead of the game, Anna. That's good for tomorrow. But no, it's good. Excellent, excellent. Okay, anybody has questions on Facebook and Instagram, please put question marks first. Eliana, please share with us.
Hey, good morning, Rabbi.
Good morning.
Question for you. The 5 degrees of separation, are those equivalent, or can we relate those to the 5 levels of the soul? And then the second question is, we have these 5 degrees of separation. How does emotive thoughts or emotions, such as, or the emotions we maybe call negative, such as anger or sadness or depression, how does that affect the 5 degrees?
Excellent question. So when we speak about 5 levels of the soul, we are speaking about 3 that are incorporated from within and 2 that are encompassing the person. And what we spoke about here is not the encompassing aspect of Chaya and Yechida, as they're called. We spoke about Neshama, Ruach, and Nefesh. Those were the 3 components of the soul that are integrated within us. And we started with intelligence. We didn't start beyond intelligence. Now, but thank you for bringing that up, because it's very important to note when we speak about the soul is a simplistic whole oneness that's beyond any intelligence or emotions. Intelligence and emotions emerge from the soul. It doesn't define the soul. It emerges from the soul. It's a part of the soul, but not the essence definition of it. So what we're doing over here, and what the reference point is, or what our goal over here is, to understand the Creator within creation, not the Creator beyond creation. So the Creator within creation, what's analogous is my soul within me, not the encompassing aspects of the soul of Chaya and Yechida, but Neshama, Ruach, and Nefesh. So to put it into those terms, Neshama is the intelligence of the soul, Ruach is the emotions of the soul, and Nefesh, there's two components to Nefesh. One part of the Nefesh is the connection of the soul to the biological aspects of the body, and another part of nefesh is the behavioral part of the individual, which is thought, speech, and action. So in nefesh, you would have all three of them, and that is linked to the biology of the person, because biology of the person, I mean, the biological part of the person is the that part of the individual that we have mastery, we have control. Not that we have control over our biology, but over our physical reality. That's what the nefesh is, the physical reality. So physical reality, there's the physical part of the reality of the individual, and then there is the spiritual of the physical, which is the behavior, which is thought, speech, and action. That would be connected with nefesh. So those are the three components that we're making reference to. Is that does that resonate? Is that clear, Eliana?
Oh yeah, that definitely resonates. I don't know if I can ask another question.
Sure, go ahead, because I don't see. Go ahead. Yeah.
So when we deal with some of those negative emotions, like sadness, depression, or anger, are those then originating in the nefesh and then being expressed through the ruach and affecting our neshama?
Okay, excellent question. So the way we explained over here is, the ultimate way it's meant to be. In other words, our awareness and our intelligence, the way we perceive things, right? That's really, when we speak about intelligence over here, it's the perception. How we seeing this thing then will feed how we feel about that thing, right? So, and that is, the ideal way. So if we have a faulty way of looking at something, so for example, let's say I have a faulty way to look at um, my child. Let's say I'm looking at them at the wrong, I'm looking at them at the wrong way. What's that going to develop? Obviously, a negative emotion. If I'm looking at them the way I shouldn't be looking at them, right? Whatever that means. I'm not going to go into that discussion. That's more of a therapy question, right? But let's say I'm looking at them, I'm perceiving them in a negative light. That will then produce a negative emotion. I might be angry at them as a result because of the way I'm perceiving them. And then from that feeling of anger, I'm going to have thoughts that are going to be now the language in my mind, in my head, that I'm thinking of these negative thoughts, and then that might actually bring out to negative action or abusive words that I might say, and so on and so forth. So yes, it begins with the mind and the perception of the mind. And so you're right, it absolutely can lead and filter down into very negative behavior. So that's why, in learning Tanya, what the Alter Rebbe is trying to do for us, and it's not an easy road, is to transform the mind. Chabad, that's what Chabad is. Chachma bina v'das, wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. It's not about touching the emotions. It's about giving us the right way to perceive things with our minds. Then when we have the right way to perceive things with our minds, that will feed our hearts appropriately, that we will feel the right things that we should feel. And then it won't be, sadness, anger, and the like. It will be a healthy heart as a result. And then because of that healthy heart that you have, then the thoughts that you will be thinking will be positive, good thoughts that should be thought, and so on and so forth. I'm making this as a great generality, obviously, here, because there are times sometimes that you need to have a broken heart when you need to do tshuva and so on. So I'm just giving great generalities over here, so that we can appreciate the concept over here. So that's, yeah, and that's how it begins, right? So a child, for example, has a very weak mind because they're only a child. I mean, it's not their fault. We're not blaming them for it. It hasn't matured their brain. So therefore, their perception of what's good is a candy, for example. That's great. And we have to appreciate and understand that that's where the child is, and therefore, you know what? Yeah, give them a candy for doing something good, because that's their perception, and that makes them in their heart feel great, you know. And then they're gonna talk about this thing and do this thing and da 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 da, that mitzvah, because you know that they're doing because the candy that they're getting. When the mind develops further, and this is what we're going over here in Shayich Ve'amuna, is that through the perception, and that's what's important in today's class, that we will, you know, compare it to in tomorrow's class, is that we don't perceive God in our own image, the way we are, 5 degrees of separation, and therefore look at God that way. No, the Alter Rebbe is going to introduce to us tomorrow a different way to perceive that there isn't the 5 degrees of separation by God. That's a human condition. And as a result, when you understand this, right, and you understand as a result the unity and the oneness of God within creation, and I'm not talking about the relationship that we have with God, which is even beyond that, but just God as the power of God within creation, when we'll appreciate and know that, well, that's going to feed our heart. That our sense of, you know, the unity and the oneness of God, we will sense in our heart, and therefore we will think differently, talk differently, and act differently. That's the ultimate. Excuse me 1 second. Come in. Is that, I hope, clear?
Very much so. Thank you, Rabbi.
You're very welcome. Okay. Davida, did I miss a question here? I think I did. Give me a moment. I thought I saw one question. Again, question marks before you ask the question, because then it's hard. Does our emotions, midos, affect our das? Yes. So when our emotions, I mean, it's the other way around. Das is knowledge. Das is the funnel between the intelligence and the emotions that brings it down into emotions. Oh, folks, give me one moment. Oh my gosh. You just got out from your father?
No, I'm sitting Shiva.
You're sitting?
Yeah.
Oh, you're sitting, yeah?
Until tomorrow morning.
Till tomorrow in the morning. How do I come to you? Or
Well, actually, I go to my mother's. I'm the only one that's allowed.
You're the only one. I'm just online teaching. Do you have a few moments? Give me a few moments. My apologies, folks. Someone just lost his father. So, wow. Okay. So, yes, that's where we're going with all of this. And does the midas affect us? Yeah, if we're out of whack, then yes, it will. Okay. I want to remind everybody about the Tanya journaling. I just put it up in Facebook. Please go there to find out more information about what's coming up. We're going to take Tanya teachings into a new level, starting just over a week with a journaling that we can take the daily class or whenever we come to study and take the message of the day or what resonated with you and how to bring that into your life and to actually be able to see, slowly but surely, real changes in your life as you take ownership over your life. So that's going to be coming up, and sign up, please, because it's only through a sign up that you'll be able to get involved in this next phase. That's very exciting. On Clubhouse, if you private message me, I will get you the information, or if you just go to TanyaRabbi.com, you'll find it there. Tanya Journal. Jeff, go ahead.
I was really struck by the idea of intelligence or wisdom and thought and kind of constriction, like you kind of mentioned in the throat. And I'm thinking of that as separation. And in some way, I don't know if this is also what you're saying, but there's the creation from the crown or from top down kind of thing. So I was looking at that idea. But I just wanted to add that I think it's kind of ironic or tragic, or maybe it's good that the things that I experience most passionately have to do with things I say and do.
Right.
So there's it's almost like turned upside down. Like I would think that you know what I mean? It feels like it's almost turned upside down. But maybe that's the best we can do as humans.
So, what we've explained over here is the vitality, the life force of the soul as it expresses itself in intelligence is much greater, lesser in emotions, lesser in language, as these degrees of separation. That being said, each one of them have their own source. Emotions emerge from intelligence, but emotions are not created by intelligence. They emerge from it. Our thoughts and our speech our thoughts from it emerges our speech, but speech has its own source, and therefore it's possible that it works the other way around as a result. In other words, from thinking, we see that sometimes when we think something too much, we develop a much more powerful emotion that is probably usually not healthy. Usually not healthy, right? Usually negative, because we overthink it, and then that creates a even stronger emotion. So it's true, it does work the other way around, because ultimately it is rooted in a different place, and therefore it has the power to work the opposite direction. That being said, still, language emerges from emotions. Emotions emerge from perspective. Now we can change that perspective because of the thoughts and the talking, that we talk and talk and talk about something, and then it just arouses the emotions even more so. Absolutely. And generally that might not be in a healthy way, but that's a whole different discussion. But good point, very good point. Okay.
So, Rabbi, can I ask a question?
Yeah, just give me one moment, because I don't want to miss something here, because what happens is I miss people's points over here. Just give me. If the neshama is born with more chesed or born with more gvura, does that affect the thoughts and the knowledge? Absolutely. But then we can work on that. Okay? As God creates us constantly, how does his breath that translates the words and the letters treat... Okay, we're going to get into that, Susanna. That's not today's class. That'll be in the next classes. But good question. Go ahead, Vilma. Vilma?
I believe you spoke about the vitality or the source that's different, like within the thoughts, within the emotions, within the speech, within the action, that there's more separation between, and that one of them, I guess thoughts, I'm not sure, has the most vitality.
A thought has more vitality than speech, and that's why you're always thinking and not always speaking. There's greater vitality. You're always feeling and you're always having perspective, right? But you're not always speaking, you're not always doing. You're always having a perspective because your eyes, your brain is always working, and you always perceive things you might not even be, might not even be aware that you're perceiving, but you're perceiving, and that's feeding your emotions at all times. That's beyond language. Language isn't all the time. Well, language of thought is, because we're always thinking. Um, and so you can see that in speech, we're not always speaking, we're not always doing, um, because the soul is much more expressed and much more powerfully expressed in intelligence, lesser in emotions, lesser in thought, and lesser speech, and lesser in action, right? And that's why intelligence is much more, how much do we fathom the brain? Do we understand the brain? Compared to language, we understand better. We understand the power of language, how it works, but more than we do understand the brain. Why? Because the brain is much more an expression of the soul, and therefore much more a greater life force expression than the capability that I can move this Kleenex box, I can raise my hand, and so on. I hope that was clear.
Yes. And so, as I understand it, the mind, like the capabilities of the mind, are an expression of the soul, but we're not using all of our capabilities of our mind. And there's a subconscious too that is
that's
also
part of the mind. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That we don't fully understand.
Oh,
but
far from anything understanding. Yeah.
Right. But then there's also the soul itself, which is separate, of course, from the mind.
Yes, the soul is the essence of the soul that's beyond it. Yes, absolutely.
But the soul is actually, we don't understand it, but as far as I understand it, it is recording everything in a way that the mind isn't really capable of doing in our bodies.
I'm not certain what that means, but I don't know. I don't know what that means.
There's so much more awareness in the soul than there is in the mind, as I understand it.
No, but awareness is of the mind. The soul
like
is
not
awareness. The soul is beyond. The soul
beyond,
is not defined by awareness.
Right.
The soul is not defined by it. That's the major first revelation of it, and that's why it's in the brain more so than it is elsewhere. And that's why brain has awareness, and no other part of us has awareness.
But we are not capable of processing everything. But
no, for sure not. For sure.
The soul, as I understand it, does. It records everything, and that's the best way.
Yeah. Okay, you're right. Okay, that's true. Yeah. That's true. Very true. Okay, we're going to continue tomorrow on this, so please join. A reminder: go to Tanya Rabbi. We only have a few places left for sign up. So whoever's truly interested in taking this to the next level of Tanya journaling, this is the time to do it. I'm Rabbi Ronnie Fine, coming to you from Chabad Zichron Kedoshim in Montreal, Canada, where it's a privilege and a pleasure to share with you, Tanya. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.